Say with the French president, who had been due to speak to the French nation tonight on live television. That was cancelled so that he could make his way here to inspect the damage for himself. But even now, that fire continues to rage. Such was its ferocity, such was the suddenness with which it engulfed the structure. Jake.
And Melissa, as you noted, Catholics have just begun celebrating Holy Week, which culminates with Easter Sunday. That must be all the more reason why people are just having a tough time dealing with this tragic fire, it happening during this week of all weeks.
That's right. The timing of this, of course, makes it particularly dreadful. And that's what you sense from the Catholics who've gathered here to sing those hymns and to be with one another as they continue to watch this tragedy, this catastrophe, not just for Paris, but for the world unfold. Clearly, the meaning for the Catholics as they entered Holy Week, as they prepared for Easter Sunday, which would have been celebrated here in Notre Dame behind me, as it is every year with a beautiful ceremony. That will now not be taking place. The question is how long it's going to take them to bring this fire under control, and once they do manage to get inside, how substantial and irretrievable the damage will have been. The other question, of course, how this could have begun as suddenly and as violently as it did tonight.
All right, Melissa Bell on the scene. Thank you so much. Stay there. We're going to come back to you, and I just want to bring in this note. We're told by the Paris Fire Brigade Commander General Jean-Claude Gallet that the next hour and a half will be crucial to efforts to save what remains of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Mr. Gallet said there's a risk that the great bell falls. If the bell falls, it's the tower that collapses. There are firefighters inside and outside. The next hour and a half will be crucial, he said. Joining me now on the phone is the French ambassador to the United States, Monsieur Gerard Araud. Good to talk to you again. I'm sorry it's under these conditions, Mr. Ambassador. When did you learn that Notre Dame was on fire? Tell us your reaction.
Well, you know, I didn't think that I could be so emotional, and I'm still, well, it's unbelievable. You know, for me, it's, and for us, for the French, it's the symbol of Paris. You know, I can't think of the skyline of Paris without the spire of Notre Dame, you know, which has just collapsed. It's 1,000 years of my history, it's our national identity which is burning. You know, it's awful. You know, I'm sorry to be so emotional, but you know, there are not words, you know, to say.
No need to apologize. In fact, Mr. Macron said, like all our countrymen, I'm sad tonight to see this part of us burn. The idea that Notre Dame Cathedral is actually not just a building, it is part of all of France, including the French people.
You know, it's really, and when I was passing by Notre Dame, you know, really I was looking at Notre Dame without having a feeling, and suddenly I realized, you know, facing this disaster, this destruction, how much it mattered for us, you know, how much it was a part of ourselves.
Ambassador Araud, do you know, have you been given any indication how close firefighters are to getting this fire out, how confident they are that they will be able to beat back the fire within the next hour and a half?
No, I really, you know, fire is always so unpredictable. You know, here we are talking of a frame of 30 tons of wood, which is burning. Nobody knows the temperature now inside the cathedral, but I was told where it was evacuated.
The Paris prosecutors have opened an investigation into this fire. Is there any indication that this was intentional as opposed to accidental?
You know, when you have any fire, immediately you have an investigation which is launched, because even if it's an accident, there will be the problem of the responsibility of the accident, from who is responsible, or whether there is a human responsibility in the accident. As you know, there was a big restoration work going on. Part of the church was actually covered by scaffolds, and apparently, but again, apparently the fire started from the scaffold. So we have to wait for the investigation.
Ambassador Araud, thank you for taking time on such an emotional day for you. I know that this will be rebuilt, and I know that it will be stronger than before, but our hearts go out to you and all of our brothers and sisters in France tonight.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I want to bring in CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward. And Clarissa, Notre Dame is obviously more than just a church. For Catholics in France, it has global significance.
It really does, Jake. And I mean, you've been to Paris many times. We've covered horrific attacks in Paris together back in 2015 after the Bataclan attack. And Notre Dame, I mean, no one forgets the first time you visit as a young American tourist, that moment of arriving on the island, of seeing this spectacular soaring architecture, of walking through those doors and looking at the rose window, which is so unique and so beautiful. There's such a sense of majesty, of tranquility, that you really feel this sense of humility. You feel, whether you are religious or not, whether you are Catholic or Jewish or an atheist, you feel a sense of humility amid something that is greater than you. Whether it's the divine or not, you can feel it. It's palpable. And so I do think there's a huge amount of sadness, not just felt by Catholics and French people, but by all people across the world. 13 million visitors every single year, as you said, Jake. And even the name of the church itself, Notre Dame de Paris, Our Lady of Paris. This fundamentally French edifice truly was the Grande Dame of Paris. It was an institution visited by people all over the world. And it has, on many occasions in the past, faced huge challenges. It was ransacked by the Huguenots in the 1540s. It was desecrated during the French Revolution, and then was rebuilt around the time of Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame, was rebuilt over a period of 25 years. So certainly there's a sense, I think, that there will be some effort made to try to recast this magnificent structure into its former glory. But the next couple of hours, Jake, are crucial, and people are watching very closely to see, does that structure collapse? Because if the skeleton of the building collapses, it's hard to imagine how any reconstruction can even begin. And firefighters are saying this next hour and a half particularly are going to be absolutely crucial in terms of determining how much of this magnificent church can actually be saved, Jake.
Construction began somewhere in the 1160s. As you noted, it's been through some tough times before, including the Huguenots, the French Revolution. One of the amazing things about Notre Dame is that it survived World War II, and there is a cruel sadness in the fact that it was able to, the building, she was able to survive that horrible war that wreaked such havoc on Europe and the buildings and the people, more importantly, of Europe. But arriving at this tragedy today, and it looks, though, we don't know the actual reason, but it looks like for accidental reasons.
It's extraordinary. I mean, as you said, it's not just World War II, World War I, the Napoleonic Wars, the French Revolution, the Crusades, all throughout and deeply embroidered into France's history. Notre Dame has stood magnificent, notwithstanding the violence, notwithstanding the political ongoings, notwithstanding the troubles being experienced. She has survived it all. And I think the idea that possibly some seemingly random fire could somehow be responsible for an end to this magnificent structure, it is very difficult for people to get their heads around, not just in terms of the loss architecturally, but also the loss spiritually, Jake. I mean, you mentioned at the top of the show, this is Easter week. Millions of Catholics are celebrating the most important week in the Christian calendar. And Friday, Good Friday, the day of the crucifixion of Jesus, is a day of sadness. It's a day of mourning. But Sunday, Easter Sunday, the resurrection, this is supposed to be a day of renewal, of rebirth, of rejoicing, of jubilation. And so the Vatican and the French authorities, I think, now really have a challenge on their hands during this time of sadness. How can they recast this? How can they make an opportunity from this moment? How can they bring people together and provide them with some comfort amid something that may just look like a building in flames, but which speaks to something much more profound in people, which I think is why you're seeing this outpouring of grief and shock across the world, Jake. Well
said. Clarissa Ward, thank you so much. Stick by. We're going to come back to you. I want to go back to Melissa Bell, who was on the streets. And Melissa, one of the big questions here, we know that the building of Notre Dame is in horrible shape, but one of the big questions has to do with the irreplaceable, invaluable artwork, including religious artifacts that are in Notre Dame, and we're not quite sure. What are you hearing about the crown of thorns, about the original cross, about some of those items?
Well, this is one of the big questions. We've been watching that structural damage, of course, over the course of the evening, the collapse of that spire, those dramatic images of the structural damage. But of course, given how intensely that fire continues to rage inside the nave, that is the question: how much history, how much artwork will have been lost, in particular for the many Catholics who've gathered here. And I've been speaking to a priest who said to me, I had to rush here as soon as I saw the pictures, as soon as I heard of the fire, because this, Notre Dame, is my house, it is my home, it's where I was ordained, and it's where so much of what matters to Catholics resides. One of the most important relics of the Catholic Church that you mentioned, the crown of thorns brought from Constantinople to France, and that rests here inside Notre Dame, believed to have been the very one worn by Jesus Christ himself in Jerusalem just before his crucifixion. The question is, what happens to that relic? Did it survive? Might it have survived? Could anything that was actually in the nave of the building have escaped those terrible flames? And that's the question on so many of the minds of the Catholics who've gathered, who continue to sing their hymns all around us this evening in what's become a sort of makeshift and ongoing vigil, even as the extent of the fire remains an outstanding question, Jake.
Thank you, Melissa. And we just got this tweet from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who is Catholic, and she writes, Notre Dame, Paris has stood as a beating heart of religion and culture for centuries, inspiring all who have visited her. The footage of today's fire is nothing short of heartbreaking. To the people of Paris and France, know that America stands with you. It's a message from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Our coverage on this breaking news continues as the world watches in horror as the iconic Notre Dame Cathedral is consumed by flames. We'll be right back.
To many, Dubai's landscape is malls and high-rises, but there is another side. Miles and miles and miles of desert. Home to dozens of species of wildlife.
It's a completely different side to what most people expect of Dubai. But for me, this is my Dubai.
The DDCR was set up to develop Dubai's natural flora and fauna, including the iconic Arabian oryx, which used to be extinct in the wild.
We have over 600 Arabian oryx now on the reserve. So we've been very successful in that initial phase of our project. The reserve is extremely popular. We get over 300,000 visitors a year.
With the Emirate looking to welcome 20 million visitors in 2020, the preservation of Dubai's wild side isn't just good for business, but good for the planet too.
For somebody to tell you their story, it's something I take really seriously. It's not something you can just parachute in and ask somebody to open their heart to you. To peel away the layers, to get to the heart of the person who you're telling a story about.
France will never give up against the terrorists.
And delve beneath the surface of what's happening. You can hear their story, and you're going to do their story justice.
Thank you.
You have to show yourself to them.
So right now they're hovering pretty low over this area that's extensively flooded.
It's the right place to tell their story.
Our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward.
This is now the only road to get into Aleppo.
This is actually hell. This is basically what is left of rebel-held Aleppo. ISIS has control of the next village. Panic breaks out. ISIS has launched a counterattack. He showed us an AK-47, like the ones used in the Paris attacks. This is not a war zone. Residents here told me they have never seen anything like this. A cry for help in Yemen's forgotten war. I never imagined that I would be reporting in the heart of Taliban territory. Do you want to see peace? The far right is enjoying a major comeback, bringing with it a troubling rise in anti-Semitism.
You clearly get a sense of the scale and the enormity of this ice sheet.
Larissa Ward, CNN.
Traveling is not just about seeing places with the most likes or getting iconic photos.
Amazing.
It's about finding a city's DNA, meeting people who share its secrets. It's about making discoveries that wow you.
Tulips from Amsterdam.
And make you feel like a child again.
I will never forget this.
It's a world of wonder. Now go and see it. In association with Turkish Airlines.
CNN World Rugby, Saturday on CNN, in association with DHL.
I think it's expertise and passion for the story.
If you've been there, you know what's going on.
CNN Today with Michael Holmes and Amara Walker, Sunday through Thursday.
And we're back with our breaking news amid one of the holiest weeks of the year. The world-famous Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is currently on fire. Crowds watching on as the spire collapsed this afternoon. Firefighters, at least 400 of them, rushed to save what's left of the 800-year-old building. World leaders are reacting. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, just tweeted that he's, quote, horrified by the pictures coming from Paris with the fire engulfing Notre Dame Cathedral, a unique example of world heritage that has stood tall since the 14th century. We also have reaction from President Trump, who just weighed in minutes ago. Take a listen.
It's one of the great treasures of the world, the greatest artists in the world. Probably, if you think about it, I would say, Jovita, it might be greater than almost any museum in the world, and it's burning very badly. It looks like it's burning to the ground. So that puts a damper on what we're about to say, to be honest, because that is beyond countries, that's beyond anything. That's a part of our growing up. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of our lives. That's a truly great cathedral. And I've been there and I've seen it, and there's no cathedral. I think I could say there's probably no cathedral in the world like it. It's a terrible scene. They think it was caused by, at this moment they don't know, but they think it was caused by renovation. And I hope that's the reason. Renovation, you know, what's that all about? But it's a terrible sight to behold.
President Trump in a tweet also suggested that, quote, flying water tankers could be used to put out the fire. Apparently in response, the French Civil Security Agency tweeted, quote, the drop of water by air on this type of building could indeed result in the collapse of the entire structure, unquote. Dominic Thomas joins me now. He's a CNN European Affairs commentator and the chair of the French department at UCLA. And Dominic, you grew up in Paris. Seeing Notre Dame Cathedral was part of your life as a child, as a young adult. How big a deal, how big a tragedy is this for you and for the people of France?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary tragedy. When you think of France, there are two iconic buildings, the late 19th century Eiffel Tower and then the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Two iconic architectural sites that are recognizable by anybody anywhere in the world. The millions and millions of tourists that visit France every year either enter the cathedral and in fact go up into some of those, into the towers. The left tower we've seen has also been taken over by some fire. And if not, people visit the surrounding area. It sits right in the heart of Paris on one of the two old islands It is extraordinarily difficult to get to, surrounded by cobbled streets and so on. But obviously to see this building on fire is just absolutely extraordinary. And in the map that you have up there, you see that it sits juxtaposed between the historic left bank and the right bank of the city. And a lot of this area has been closed off to vehicular access, especially in the wake of various terror attacks. And it's a difficult one to get to. And the big question, of course, is, we know that there is so much wood inside, there's scaffolding, but what is the catalyst that started this fire? What are potentially the various chemical products that were there, that were being used for this meticulous renovation that takes years and years and years? And these questions are yet to be answered.
And we're told at this hour by the Paris Fire Brigade Commander General Jean-Claude Gallet that in the next hour and a half are going to be crucial. If the great bell falls, the tower will collapse, and there are firefighters inside and outside. Dominique, every individual who has gone to Notre Dame has had his or her own reaction to it. Some people have religious experiences. Some people just appreciate the fact that the construction started in the 1100s and feel a relation to the humanity from more than 800 years ago. What do you feel when you think about this building?
Yeah, well, when you see these various architectural sites, of course, they continue to perform, in this case, a contemporary religious role and function. But I think that they've gone way beyond that. They are the markers of a longer history, a history of conflict, of revolutions, and so on. And no matter what one's religious faith may be, they are part of a greater identity. They are the cornerstone, not just of French identity, but of what could argue would be European identity. And as with the attacks on the Charlie Hebdo weekly magazine that brought so much solidarity in France, this was also an attack on a very long history of conflict around freedom of expression and so on. And Notre Dame is also one of those sites that in some ways commemorates a history of divisiveness, of religious struggle, of conflict between Catholics and Protestants, and is a space also of mediation. And at a time when so much of French and European politics has been embroiled by the polemics around the far right and anti-Semitism and the problems with Islamophobia and so on and so forth, that thinking about this longer historical identity and thinking about the ways in which community and reconciliation have operated around these sites are incredibly important. They are inculcated in young people from the very early ages of schooling, and are also among the most visited sites in the world, precisely because they are architectural marvels in a way, but also because of that longer historical moments that we often forget about.
And Dominique, what do you think France will do, regardless? I mean, we know that obviously the building is in horrible shape. Will France rebuild?
Absolutely and unequivocally. Not only will they rebuild, but the fact that these iconic sites are being renovated are actually a crucial component of French foreign policy, that the soft power of France remains untainted, and that the very attraction, the touristic attraction, this is, let's not forget, the most visited city in the world. I think at the time of the London Olympics, London rose up to that level. But this is an incontrovertible site of global tourism. The French state has been investing and renovating these sites, and there is absolutely no doubt that renovating Notre Dame will be at the front and center as to what they do. But there's a big difference between renovating the physical structure of the building and even contemplating replacing the stained glass windows, the iconic objects that are found within that. And that, I think, beyond, of course, the concern around the loss of human life, the true catastrophe of this is not only the architectural structure, but all that was contained within it and that has come under attack here in the guise of these flames. So you can expect Emmanuel Macron, in his first declaration, to announce and to talk about the history of this building, but to make an unequivocal commitment to the rebuilding, even if it takes a generation to do so, which in the broader realm of history given the decades and centuries even that it took to build this building by hand, will seem like a relatively small feat.
And we know that there's still so much that we don't know at this hour. We don't know if there were any casualties. We don't know the condition of any of the artwork or any of the religious artifacts, the crown of thorns, the holy sacraments, and more. Dominic, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Joining me on the phone now is Patrick Bolkowski. He lives in Paris. He's on the scene there. And Patrick, you were at a nearby restaurant when you heard that Notre Dame was on fire. You didn't think it was real at first.
Well, yeah, definitely. Good evening, by the way. And it was something incredibly, like something that you really don't want to see. And I was just having a regular coffee with my colleague from Poland who visited me this morning. And so we smelled that something is burning, and we were sure that something is going on wrong in the kitchen of the restaurant. But then the bartender told us that apparently the Notre Dame is I'm standing in front of Notre Dame, so I can see you. At this moment, we can see on the left tower, and also like in the middle, some flashlight. I don't know who is there. So some people are actually right now there. I think that the fire is not there anymore. We can see some white lights, some flashlights. I don't know if there's investigators or firemen who are trying to calm the fire that are inside right now. So I hope that that is not gonna get worse. Even though I got photos from my friends that live just in front of the Notre Dame, the photos from behind that were horrible. So we can see that the roof just collapsed. And so what I see right now, standing in front, is the facade. So it's the front of the Notre Dame. I don't know what's behind, and I feel like I mean, I've seen the photos on the internet, and I just don't want to see it live. I think that everything that survived is just the front that we can see right now, and with all those flashlights of, I guess, firemen or the investigators that are right now inside the building. I don't know what else to say. I think it's just Patrick, horrible.
Yeah, Patrick, one of our reporters there said that the crowd that had formed outside Notre Dame, it's almost like a small vigil mourning the loss of this building. Tell us about the mood of the individuals with whom you're standing.
So, well, I'm standing, we are like thousands here, I would say. We were thousands. I think that now people are trying to go back home. And most of the people on my left side, I can hear the prayers. They're singing in front of the Notre Dame. They pray, they cry. Everybody's sad. Nobody's laughing. And it's like, I mean, I think that when you're standing in front of the Notre Dame and you hear all the prayers and all the mood that is sad, it just gets you really get how serious it is, actually. And right now, when I'm talking to you, I see another flashlight from the inside of the building of Notre Dame. So, and on the left, I can hear people praying. And then the police that block the streets, they cannot really move. You cannot really get close to the cathedral. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how it looks somewhere else, but here it's everybody's very, very, very clearly sad and praying that nobody lost their life inside.
An eyewitness to this tragedy, Patrick Bolkowski, thank you so much. Joining me on the phone right now, Lindita Akula and Paige Walters. They're both American students studying abroad. They're visiting Paris on their spring break. Lindita, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You were on the Eiffel Tower, I'm told, watching parts of the cathedral collapse. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was going up to the top of the Eiffel Tower with my friend Paige, and as we were going up, we saw lots of smoke billowing out from the middle of the city. And I looked over, and we heard people talking about Notre Dame, and so we were getting multiple texts from our friends and family just asking about what was going on, if we were safe, and just trying to figure out what was happening. We then found out about the fire there, and I then took some photos, and we were just like very confused because earlier that day we actually had gone to Notre Dame and we're standing in front of it and everything looked completely fine.
And Paige, tell us about that. You visited Notre Dame. You walked by earlier today. What was it like there before the fire struck?
Yeah, today it was beautiful. We walked on the entire thing, got to see the amazing sights. Everyone was eagerly going inside and looking at all the views, and we took some pictures. We were just so happy to be there, walking along the river and just taking in all the beauty, and then to be up on the top of the Eiffel Tower, so excited to see that view, but to then see this beautiful view that we had just experienced, just completely up in flames. The flames were getting worse as the hours went on. We just saw the flames growing even greater, and it was silent up at the top. It really was. People weren't talking, I feel like, as they would have been. It was very somber.
Paige, I just want to make sure before I let you guys go, you and Lindita you've called home and let your moms and dads let you know that you're okay, yes?
Yeah. Yes, they know that we're safe.
Okay, good.
It's just really amazing. Also, you could just smell the smoke, and we looked through the telescopes, and you could just see the firefighters working and trying to contain the fire. It was very, very sad.
Stay safe, ladies. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your calling in. We're going to have more on our breaking news coming up. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us.
Grow your media business at 2454 Abu Dhabi. We are home to over 470 partners across production, gaming, digital, advertising, and more. With complete end-to-end services for the media industry, we offer real benefits beyond real estate. By joining our thriving ecosystem, you can access over 380 million people across the Middle East and North Africa who are eager to watch, play, and interact with new ideas, all creating endless business opportunities for our community. For the past 10 years, our partners have been making likes, capturing hearts, and generating views all around the world. And we've got big plans for the future too, with a brand new creative campus and production area. So get in on the action with 0% corporate tax and 100% ownership. Make it at the Capital for content creators. Join us today at 2454.com/join.
This campaign has been dominated, of course, by Benjamin Netanyahu fighting for his political survival.
Becky, they don't know yet if tonight's event will be a celebration party or a concession speech.
Benny Gantz is a former Army Chief of Staff, who blunted Benjamin Netanyahu's claim to be the only one who can provide security.
Netanyahu claiming victory.
I will be the Prime Minister of all Israeli citizens.
Netanyahu set to become the longest ever serving Prime Minister of Israel.
A CNN Freedom Project special. Amid the beauty of Ghana's Lake Volta lies the scourge of child slavery. As many as 20,000 boys forced to work in the fishing industry.
It is like a slave and a master. So when the child goes down and he doesn't come back, he doesn't actually care much.
How to break this cycle of poverty and exploitation. See the efforts to restore a normal childhood to these survivors. Saturday. All new Inside Africa. Unlocking the mysteries behind the continent you thought you knew. A Cape Verdean island comes alive when an annual celebration of culture takes over the streets.
We have a phrase in Creole that we always say, which literally means it's in your blood.
Inside Africa, Tuesday, only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
I'm Nick Robertson in Aden, Yemen, and this is CNN.
only given 10 minutes on the ground in the village.
Many of the statues ISIS toppled were fakes.
$500 for 2 children to sold off like that.
This can't really be happening.
This shot tells a story.
What does that indicate? What's a typical day like? Will there be any sanctions? Robin.
Hi, Robin. Robin, it was a surreal period.
I'm Atika Schubert in Berlin, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Amaryl Walker as we follow this breaking news story. This is a live look at the breaking news in Paris, the devastating fire at Notre Dame Cathedral. The head of the Paris Fire Brigade is saying the next hour will be crucial in the effort to save what is left of the world's famous landmark. We are live from Studio 7 here at CNN Center. Thanks for being with us. One of the world's most iconic, majestic cathedrals is now a charred, smoldering mess, as you see that orange glow there in the evening. This is Notre Dame right now, hours after flames began tearing through this international treasure. We don't know what caused this devastation just yet. We do know that millions of people are somberly watching and wondering during what is the holiest week of the year for Christians. Huge crowds in Paris have been gathering near the cathedral as it burns before them, sending searing pain through the heart of the city. A few hours ago, the spire, you can see at the center of the screen, if we can show that, dramatically collapsed. Take a look. There it goes, that spire, and you can hear as it tumbles down, gasps in the background. That spire known as Our Lady's Arrow. Firefighters have been doing what they can over the last few hours, but reaching this area during rush hour was not easy, as you'd imagine. It took time to get the water all the way up to those fiery peaks. Earlier, the French President Emmanuel Macron tweeting this: Our Lady of Paris in flames. Emotion for a whole nation. Thoughts for all Catholics and for all French. Like all our countrymen, I'm sad tonight to see this part of us burn. This 13th century medieval marvel has been called a feat of Gothic architecture, with its stained glass rose window, flying buttresses and towers. It is one of Paris's most popular tourist sites, drawing an estimated 13 million visitors a year. The big question right now, can it be saved? Melissa Bell is with us now, live from Paris with more. Melissa, we heard some really ominous warnings from the fire brigade saying that the next few hours will be crucial to determine whether or not the cathedral can be saved.
That's right. We've also been hearing from a junior interior minister here in France, Hammer, saying that it wasn't yet clear that it could be saved. So extremely worrying words coming there, both from the politicians and from the Paris Fire Brigade. And that's because even though the flames that we watched earlier on so spectacularly consuming the roof of the nave and reaching even up to the height of the main towers on that iconic facade have largely now died down and been brought under control. Firefighters are clearly inside because we're seeing the light from their torches through the front of that facade as they try and bring the rest of it under control. But inside, of course, the fire remains intense, and so many questions about the structure. One of the things the fire brigade has been saying, Amber, is that if the bells collapse, it could bring down one of those towers yet. So that extraordinary structure of what you say, as you say, is one of the world's great Gothic marvels, is far from safe at this stage. And all around, The emotion here in Paris remains intense. For really much of the last couple of hours, Catholics have gathered and have been singing hymns constantly. A sort of vigil has been going on, even as locals and tourists alike gather to watch this tragedy unfold. Clearly the question of how this began, of how this extraordinarily intense fire that ripped through the cathedral as quickly as it did could have begun is the outstanding question. An investigation's been opened. The chief prosecutor visited the site earlier with the French president. He'd been due to speak on French television tonight. That was cancelled, of course, given the gravity of what was unfolding here. It was just before 7 p.m. local time, in the middle of rush hour, that this extraordinary edifice took fire as social images on social media began flooding through. Images, first of all, of the fire, and then very quickly of those flames coming through that structure, through the roof itself. And of course, Parisians gathered to get as close as they could to try and witness what was happening. Very quickly, though, the cordon pushed people back. But in the beginning, there were cinders falling from the sky onto our heads. Such was the intensity of these flames, even as far back as we'd been pushed. So those dramatic early images clearly now over, but structurally, so many questions, so many risks still for the edifice itself. And of course, for the Catholics who've gathered here, and I was speaking to a priest who rushed out here as soon as he'd heard earlier on, Amra, he said, what about the relics that are inside? As you know, Notre Dame matters to the world's Catholics beyond mattering to the world's humanity, of course, because of what's contained inside, the extraordinary artwork, the history, and the relics. The crown of thorns, believed to have been worn by Jesus Christ as he went towards his crucifixion and brought to France from Constantinople by Louis IX in the 13th century, is housed inside Notre Dame. What has become of it tonight, he asked. This house is an evening of tremendous tragedy and emotion for France as well.
So many precious items and relics inside, and as you said, so many questions about whether those things have survived. Will this cathedral, this landmark, indeed survive as well? You were just seeing those two pictures we showed you. On the left was a fire that was burning earlier, and you can see those flames were much larger just an hour or so ago. Those are the pictures from not that long ago. Behind you, though, it looks like there is a little bit of an orange glow. Just an update, Melissa, on the firefight right now, because we did hear from the Paris Fire Brigade Commander General, who was saying that the most efficient action is happening from the inside, because this is about stopping the spread of the flames. In terms of the number of firefighters that have been dispatched, how is this firefight happening? Are we seeing anything happening from the air, or is much of the bulk happening from the inside?
Well, in the early minutes after this catastrophe began to unfold, the great difficulty of the firefighters, of course, Hammer, was just getting to the structure itself in the middle of rush hour. And given the geography of Notre Dame, sitting as it does on an island in the Seine River, in the very heart, the historic heart of Paris, it was extremely hard to get to. And of course, the great crowds that are around the monument and this part of Paris on any given evening just before 7 p.m. were pretty substantial. So the first hour or so was an hour of pure chaos as firefighters tried to get close enough and then tried to get their jets of water sufficiently positioned sufficiently highly enough to get to those flames that were reaching up to the very top of the edifice, engulfing the roof of the nave. And that question about why perhaps water might not have been dropped by the air, put by the American president himself in a tweet, was answered directly by Parisian authorities, who said, look, we could not have used flying water tankers simply because the water that would have fallen from the air would have damaged the structure irretrievably and perhaps threatened the buildings beyond. So it was considered and set aside as a possibility. And the only real way of getting these flames under control and trying to save what could still be saved was trying to get inside what would have been a burning inferno. That's why it's taken as long as it has. That's why those flames raged for as long as they did in such a spectacular and tragic show here this evening, Amma.
What do we know about what parts of the cathedral have burned or are currently burning? Because we were talking about the frame, and you're talking about the wooden framework that holds up this church. And I mean, if you just read the facts from Notre Dame Cathedral's website, it says that the frame, which is actually called the Forest because it was built from 1,300 oak trees, which is enough wood to fill more than 21 hectares of a forest. Again, this is coming from Notre Dame's website. But tell us more about the framework inside, because obviously that is concerning. I mean, if it's timber, that is highly flammable. And also, you know, what we know about that and where the flames are currently burning right now, Melissa.
Of course, quite right, Amra. The amount of fuel that was inside the cathedral as those flames began to overtake it would have powered on this fire and turned it really into a very substantial fire before anyone could do anything about it. And beyond that, of course, there was some renovation going on some of the statues on the outside of the church and at the top. It is surrounded by scaffolding that would have added, of course, to the intensity of the flames and the ability of the fire to make progress and engulf more and more of the structure. And what was extraordinary watching this unfold tonight were the reactions of the crowd, because this was watched in real time live by so many thousands of people this evening gathered all around Notre Dame, not just here where we're standing, but on the other side of the river as well, as they watched helplessly these tremendous treasures go up in flames. Was this idea of how it could be stopped, how that fuel, which would have to burn itself out before anything could be done about it, might be brought to an end. 400 firefighters in the end involved in that rescue operation, some of them now inside, we understand, and so many questions about things like the stained glass windows, many of them dating back to the 13th century. We understand from some reports in the French press that some of them might have been saved, others will have been lost. And the counting of the cost of this, what's gone on here tonight, not the financial cost so much as the cost to history, to humanity, of everything that's been lost irretrievably, will only begin once this fire has finally been extinguished. And again, we are nowhere near that point yet. As both the politicians and the fire brigade have pointed out, this is an ongoing emergency with the next couple of hours likely to be absolutely crucial in bringing it under control. And as we're hearing from France's junior interior minister, the fact of the saving of this cathedral far from certain even at this stage.
Very concerning, and a lot of people from around the world watching this scene with a lot of concern, a lot of heartbreak, many prayers being said right now. And as we can hear in the backdrop there of Melissa Bell, people who've gathered there, locals and tourists, singing hymns and just hoping for the best that this Notre Dame Cathedral, this symbolic landmark, a famous tourist destination, a church, a historical building, will be saved, hopefully, by the firefighters. Thank you very much, Melissa Bell, on the scene for us. We appreciate it. Of course, the Vatican now responding, and it has released a statement in response to this Notre Dame fire. This is the statement, quote, "The Holy See has learned with shock and sadness the news of the terrible fire that has devastated the Cathedral of Notre Dame de Paris, symbol of Christianity in France and in the world. We express our closeness to the French Catholics and to the people of Paris. We pray for the firefighters and for all those who are doing everything possible to face this dramatic situation." Vatican correspondent Delia Gallagher joining us now live from our Rome bureau with more. Delia, just devastating to see these pictures, devastating not knowing what will happen to Notre Dame Cathedral.
Well, that's right, Amra, because keep in mind, apart from its importance to humanity, this is a regular working church for Paris's Catholics. And this being the most important week for Catholics, Easter week, it celebrates the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, the most important time in the Christian calendar. And this is a church where they would have gone, where inside that church, as you mentioned, with Melissa, is what is believed to be the crown of thorns that Jesus was crowned with on Good Friday, which will be coming up this Friday. And there's a veneration that they do inside the Notre Dame Cathedral for that. So there's a lot of sort of very intimate and personal things that the French Catholics, and particularly Parisian Catholics, will miss about this church at this time. For the Pope and for the Vatican, of course, together with the rest of Catholic cardinals and bishops around the world. We have been hearing from many of them in the United States, for example, Cardinal Dolan, Cardinal O'Malley, all issuing their closeness to French Catholics at this time. This is a church which has seen the presence of John Paul II and Pope Benedict, and Pope Francis tonight also expressing his closeness to the people of France. Amra?
Yeah. Delia Gallagher, we appreciate it. As you heard Delia say there, this is not just a tourist destination. This is a working church. It is still in use. It was still in use as of today by the Roman Catholic Church for Sunday Mass. It is Holy Week for Christians around the world, leading up to Easter Sunday. Again, just a really precarious situation right now. The question is, will the bell tower collapse? We're going to leave it there for now. I'm Amaryl Walker. We'll have more of CNN's breaking coverage with Wolf Blitzer next.
We see breakthrough medicines getting to patients in record time. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson. Consider it solved.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Sunday to Thursday on CNN.
Every other industry is getting disrupted. Why would ours be any different? What will it look like? I'm not sure. So in 2009, I formed my own venture capital fund to invest just in mobility solutions. Not even sure what that meant, really. And it was because I knew that fundamentally our business was going to have to change.
A CNN Freedom Project special. Amid the beauty of Ghana's Lake Volta lies the scourge of child slavery. As many as 20,000 boys forced to work in the fishing industry.
It is like a slave and a master. So when the child goes down and he doesn't come back, he doesn't actually care much.
How to break this cycle of poverty and exploitation. See the efforts to restore a normal childhood to these survivors. Saturday.
I'm Paula Newton in Caracas, and this is CNN.
Many of the statues ISIS toppled were fakes.
$500 for 2 children. Just sold off like that.
Stand by in 3, 2, 1.
Robin.
Hi, Robin. Robin, it was a surreal period.
The fight for the old city is the closing chapter of ISIS's presence. They have left absolute devastation in their wake. Extraordinary to stand exactly where ISIS may, in fact, have been plotting attacks against the West. We get rare permission to enter. We're headed now to deep inside gang territory.
Venezuela's dark lurch into poverty and chaos. This crisis all created by the mad policies of a government that now wants to hide the collapse.
Eerily quiet, isn't it? This city almost constantly living with the threat of a Russian invasion.
One of the most remote places on the planet. CNN gained rare access to the island to see the shocking toll of our daily habits.
They just seem to be following us wherever we go.
Mission planning, American Air Power.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
Happening now, breaking news, Notre Dame destroyed. The 800-year-old Notre Dame Cathedral, a symbol of Paris, goes up in flames. Its iconic spire has fallen. The roof has collapsed, and the rest of the structure is at grave risk as emergency crews try to evacuate precious artwork. Still burning. The cathedral has been burning now for hours, and an orange glow now lights up the sky over Paris. Thousands of shocked onlookers are gathered while firefighters try desperately to save what remains of the landmark. We'll take you to the scene. Mueller is coming. The Justice Department says the redacted version of the Mueller report will be released to Congress and the public on Thursday. The president is sending out anxious tweets as his legal team prepares for the worst and gets ready to push back. And blocking Congress. Despite a new demand by a powerful House committee, the White House is refusing to give up the president's tax returns and is rejecting other demands by Democrats. Who will win this battle?
Not because you've been here.
We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, a truly catastrophic fire is raging at the 800-year-old Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, an iconic landmark, a symbol of France, and an international treasure that attracts millions of visitors a year. The fire quickly engulfed the roof, encased in construction scaffolding, and destroyed the spire, which toppled into the flames. Thousands and thousands of onlookers, some of them crying, are staying into the night as firefighters desperately try to save at least part of the cathedral. Also tonight, the Justice Department says the redacted version of the Mueller report will be released to Congress and to the American public early Thursday. And that has sent President Trump into a Twitter frenzy and his legal team into urgent damage control. I'll speak with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of the Judiciary Committee. And our correspondents and analysts, they will have full coverage of the day's top stories. Let's begin with the devastating fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral. Our correspondents are standing by in Paris, but we begin with our Brian Todd, who's got the very latest. Brian?
Wolf, this is still a terrible scene, a desperate battle by firefighters at Notre Dame Cathedral. They're working inside and outside the structure, trying to keep the fire from spreading. The commander of the fire brigade now says they're worried about the tower collapsing. We have new information tonight on how this disaster unfolded. Tonight, Notre Dame, one of the oldest and most iconic structures in Paris, is burning out of control. For people who'd flocked to the area near the centuries-old cathedral, the fire, which broke out around 6:30 in the evening local time, was obvious almost immediately. Across the Paris skyline, at first, the smoke could be seen billowing through the roof, then the flames. Within moments, the roof of the more than 800-year-old cathedral was completely engulfed. Crowds streamed into Paris streets and squares, watching in shock.
We ran out of the bar, and what I've seen in front of me was terrific and horrible. The fire was so big that I could see actually the ashes on my jacket.
The flames rapidly grew upward into the more than 150-year-old wooden spire, burning through the structure until it began leaning and eventually collapsed into the main sanctuary. French officials say more than 400 firefighters were deployed. Some climbed up the building even while it was burning, trying to save the iconic structure. In a dramatic scene, Parisians sang hymns as their beloved cathedral burned just a few days before Easter. It was not immediately known what caused the fire, and there's no official word on injuries. Construction work was being done on the cathedral, and it's been surrounded by scaffolding.
These flames just grew and spread across the roof and the spire. It was terrible.
Now, the fire brigade commander says they are now frantically trying to take out the most precious artwork that was inside the cathedral, and that they are still at a critical juncture as to whether significant parts of the building can be saved. One local resident captured this very well. He said it's been there for so many years, and in a few minutes, half of it disappeared. His quote, "Paris without Notre Dame, madness." Wolf?
Brian, do they have any idea where in the cathedral this fire started?
The fire brigade commander, Wolf, says the initial call to emergency services notified them of a fire in the attic of Notre Dame Cathedral, so that may offer a clue, but the cause still not known right now.
All right, Brian, I know you're working the story. We'll get back to you, but right now, I want to get some more on the latest developments in Paris. Our correspondent, Melissa Bell, she's near the cathedral now. She's been there for hours watching it burn. Melissa, we're learning that it's a crucial time in terms of
but also from France's junior interior minister that it isn't even yet clear whether the cathedral can be saved, because although those very dramatic images of those flames that reach right to the top of the towers at the front of the cathedral have now died down, inside that fire continues to rage, and that has huge implications, of course, structurally. One of the questions is whether the bells might not collapse, which would then bring down the towers, those iconic towers on the facade of Notre Dame that seemed largely to have been spared. So many questions as well about what of the artwork inside, what of the relics inside, including the crown of thorns believed to have been worn by Jesus Christ as he went towards his crucifixion, brought from Constantinople by Louis IX in the 13th century, housed inside Notre Dame. Unclear at this stage whether it has been saved. We know that the firefighters are now inside the building because we can see their torches shining out through the windows of the cathedral. But for the time being, this is a battle that is very much ongoing, and this in front of the eyes of the bewildered and horrified Parisians themselves who've gathered to sing hymns throughout the evening. Early on, we had cinders falling onto our heads. That's now come to an end. The question is now whether part of this extraordinary monument, extraordinary Gothic monument, will at this stage be saved at all, Wolf.
And we hear the singing behind you, the hymns that are going on, and that's been going on for a while, presumably will continue. How far has the fire actually gone? Melissa, as far as we know, inside the cathedral, how extensive is the damage?
Well, that is one of the big questions. Very interesting, that idea that it might have begun in the attic, because what we first saw, the very first images of this tragedy that flooded social media just before 7 p.m. local time, Wolf, were of smoke coming from the very top of the roof, billowing out from the roof, and the flames that quickly followed, and it did appear to be coming from the top of the structure. That very quickly spread, and it was to the astonished gasps of this crowd that the entire tragedy unfolded, and they sort of reacted in real time as that spire collapsed, shouting in horror, many of them crying, many of them holding on to each other as they watched this Gothic monument, a monument not only, of course, that is important to Catholics and to France, but the whole of humanity go up in flames. Clearly, the damage inside will have been extensive. This was an intensive fire that took hold remarkably quickly. It was very difficult for the firefighters to get there in time because of the geography of Notre Dame, right in the historic heart of Paris, and at rush hour. That's when those flames began to consume the top part of the edifice. So very hard for them to get there, and an inability, we're hearing from French authorities, to use any water from the air because that would have damaged the structure irretrievably. They had to try and get inside the building to try and save as much of it as they could, Wolf.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking to watch all of this unfold over these past few hours. Melissa, French authorities, we understand they've obviously opened up a full-scale investigation into the fire. What are the officials saying there in Paris, where you are, about the cause?
For the time being, they're being very careful about speculating as to any cause. Clearly, the timing of this is particularly tragic. Coming up as we are to Easter Sunday, a Mass would have been celebrated, as it is every Easter Sunday in Notre Dame. And that is, on Good Friday, by the way, is the moment when that crown of thorns is exposed for worshippers to come and see. So a tragic timing to this catastrophe. Many questions about what could have started it, how it could have spread so quickly. We have no information for the time being as to whether it was an accident or whether it was started deliberately, and authorities for the time being are avoiding speculating at all, Wolf.
Is it possible for your photographer there, Melissa, to show us the crowd? Because I know the singing of the hymns continues outside the cathedral. I think our viewers would be interested in seeing the folks who have gathered there to pay their respects.
Let's try and swing the camera around.
Change battery. I really need to.
We're going to swing the camera around to try and show the crowds behind you right now. They're singing just behind me, Wolf. You can see, of course, there are thousands of people gathered around Notre Dame, many of them on the other side, of course, all around what you can see. And it is towards the back of the crowd that the crowds are singing. They've been singing there for the best part of the last 2 hours, Wolf, singing Catholic hymns, expressing their emotion, gathering really to be together at a time of great sadness and emotion. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who was here on the scene earlier, tweeted about it earlier on, saying that this was an evening of tremendous emotion, not just for Catholics, but for all of France. And that's really what we've been hearing. I was speaking to a priest who'd made his way here as quickly as he could, he told me earlier on, and he said he'd come here because this, Notre Dame, was his home. It was his house. It was where he'd been ordained. And his big question tonight was about those relics kept preciously inside Notre Dame. What has become of them for so many Catholics around the world this evening? That will be the burning question, Wolf.
So powerful, so sad. Melissa Bell, thank you. We'll get back to you. Our CNN reporter Hadass Gold is also in Paris right now. Hadass, there has been a lot of concern that the cathedral's towers could fall. What are you hearing? What's the latest?
Well, Wolf, I'm on the other side of the cathedral right now, and I don't know if you can see, but there are still orange flames coming out of the roof in the back here, and you can see 2 cranes on the other side where firemen are trying to hose down those flames. We did just get a statement from the French Secretary to the Interior Minister saying that both towers of the cathedral are safe, but they are still working to save the cathedral's works of art, and that's what a lot of people are very concerned about, are those precious works of art inside the cathedral themselves. It's not clear what will happen to them and what can be saved. Obviously, the structure has been so horribly damaged. Similar to where Melissa is, I don't know if you can hear the singing behind the camera right now. They're singing a prayer about the rosary, and they have been, as though they are holding a vigil for the cathedral. They've been singing nonstop for the last 2 hours. There are thousands of people here gathered around the River Seine, and every now and again they start applauding, especially when a fire truck starts moving, and they're applauding the work to try to save this cathedral. It is really stunning to see the number of people here. What's even more stunning, though, Wolf, is the quiet. It is very, very somber and very, very quiet to have this many people out here, and I feel as though I'm speaking very loudly right now, but because everybody is just in a quiet reflection, watching what's happening. Clearly people are praying, they're hugging, they're crying, but they're still feeling very strong. I spoke to an owner of a wine shop here, and he said he was still going to be drinking wine and toasting Notre Dame and toasting the city of Paris, Wolf.
You know, Hadassah, I mean, I want to show our viewers the very, very awful, dramatic video of the spire collapsing. Watch this. Hadass, what are you learning about the safety of the people who were inside the cathedral at the time of this awful fire?
So, Wolf, this fire started towards the end of the day. We started getting the reports about it around 7 p.m., right around when rush hour really is at its peak here in Paris. We so far don't have necessarily any firm information on anybody who has been injured. We've seen some reports of a firefighter who may have been injured. This was, luckily in a way, on a Monday, not on a weekend, but it is Easter week when tens of thousands of people come almost daily to come see the cathedral. It's obviously one of the top tourist attractions in Paris, getting millions of visitors a year. We'll probably get, hopefully, some more information on what happened to the people inside. But because the fire seems to may have started in the attic, that may have given some people time to get out in time. And we've been talking to people around, and they said that it seems as though people may have been able to get evacuated. Of course, now the concern is about the firefighters who have just been rushing in to try and save what they can of the structure and, of course, those precious works of art inside. But people here, like I said before, are just, they're still feeling very strong about the city, very sad, but they expect, and they are already talking about how they will rebuild Notre Dame.
You mentioned the artwork, the Catholic relics inside the cathedral. What do we know, Hadass, about all these priceless treasures? Have they survived?
So that is, the Interior Secretary did say they are working to save those precious pieces of art. A lot of them are sort of centered in this sort of museum. I believe it's near the front of the cathedral. And so that might have given them some time, because if that fire did start in the attic, that might have given them some time to try to remove some of those pieces. It's not clear. I mean, there are hundreds of pieces in there that are so valuable. And it's not just the artwork inside. It's also the structure itself is a piece of art, including all of the statues inside and outside that are just absolutely amazing. If you've ever been to Notre Dame, it is absolutely breathtaking. And so there is a lot of hope that they can at least save some of those materials, and also obviously hopefully save the structure itself. The spire has already fallen, but they are hoping to get as many of those pieces of art out and safely, and hopefully get them restored once again, Wolf.
Most of the roof has burned. We see scaffolding outside, the structure still there. So it's precisely, what are you seeing and hearing about the structure?
So I'm looking behind me right now, and it seems as though we can no longer see the bits of the fire coming out of the roof. So that does seem to be an improvement. Right now, they're still shooting water cannons onto it, but it looks like a different Notre Dame than what I saw just yesterday when I was here. The outline is completely different. People are now applauding. I don't know if because now it seems as though the fire is at least somewhat contained. There are fire trucks now moving away, and everybody is obviously very happy. But it seems as though most of the fire, at least from what we can see from the back of Notre Dame, has gone down. This is the first time, I have to say, in hours that we are not seeing fire just billowing out of here. The smoke was incredible. You could see it from blocks away. So to see it finally go down to the point where we're not seeing flames licking up out of the roof, that's a good moment of what has otherwise been an absolutely very, very sad day, Wolf.
I assume, Hadass, the smell of that smoke still permeates the air where you were.
You could smell it the moment I came out of, they had closed down the metro station that's closest. The moment I came out of the next closest metro station, you could smell. It smelled almost like a fragrant wood smell, and it is still permeating the area. And there was ash falling all over the place. Melissa had talked about earlier how she was getting ash on her hair, and it's still, you can still smell it all around here. But it is just an incredible scene. I have never seen anything like this. I've never seen this many people out all in one place and completely quiet, witnessing what is the very, very sad destruction of one of the most important monuments in Paris. I was speaking to one person who said that Paris without Notre Dame is not Paris, Wolf.
Good point, Hadass. I want you to stand by. Melissa Bell's on the other side of the Notre Dame Cathedral. The crowds near you, we could hear them singing, Melissa, and we just heard Hadass tell us that maybe there's still some hope for the structure to survive, or at least a piece of that structure to survive. What else are you seeing and hearing?
Well, those flames that had been brought under control but were still really lighting up the center of the cathedral. We could see it through the windows of this front, this facade of Notre Dame, so famous, of course, this famous facade. We could see still the orange of the fire burning brightly inside. That appears now to have died down somehow. What we are seeing through those windows now are the flashlights of the firefighters who've clearly managed to make their way inside. And the question will be, now that they're inside the structure, whether they manage to get that fire fully under control. We've been told a short while ago that this hour would be absolutely crucial, and so they're in there trying to get the end of the fire under control in the heart of Notre Dame itself, also to try and get an idea of how much damage has been done. But still, we're told that the structural threat remains, because if those bells were to fall through, then there could be still some structural damage done to those towers, and there is still that threat that they might collapse. So still a very fluid situation, still a very dangerous situation. The crowds are still being kept back well away by a police cordon that's been put up, and still their numbers are not diminishing because of the tremendous emotion, because of the need really to be here. There's not terribly much to see anymore now that those flames have been brought down under control, now that that orange glow seems to have subsided from what we can see out here. But a need, as ever, on occasions like this, to be together, to be surrounded, to understand what has happened, and to try and get to the bottom of what the investigation is going to tell us about how this terrible tragedy could have come about, Wolf.
And how the people of Paris, the visitors, the residents, they've responded. We hear them singing, they're praying, they're bringing, they're singing these hymns. You know what? I just want to listen briefly to this hymn right now. Melissa, I want you to stand by. Hadass is getting some more information. She's on the other side of the cathedral. She can also hear the folks over there singing these hymns. But what else are you learning, Hadass?
Well, Wolf, we are getting information about injuries. The French junior interior minister says that one firefighter has been seriously injured. That's also according to the fire brigade commander. That is really stunning, that one injury after such an incredibly large fire. I mean, thankfully, there haven't been more injuries that we're not, at least not hearing so far. As we noted, it looks as though the fire may have started in the attic, and that might have helped give people time to get out of the cathedral, hopefully give time also to save some of those precious pieces of art that are in the cathedral as well. But so far we're hearing one firefighter has been seriously injured. We don't know the extent of those injuries yet right now, but the junior interior minister also told reporters that the fire is now weaker, something that we can see right now. We're no longer seeing the flames coming through the roof of the building, which we had been seeing for the past few hours. They say that they are now in a time of cooling, but both towers of the cathedral, both that very famous front facade, those two towers do appear to be safe, and they are still working to try and save those precious pieces of art, Wolf.
Let's hope they can. Hadass, stand by. I'm going to get back to you. But I want to bring in our chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward, right now. Clarissa, tell us more about the significance of this holy cathedral, not just to Catholics, but to people around the world.
You know, Wolf, when you hear those hymns and you look at these epic scenes of this extraordinary battle against this blaze consuming one of the most beloved edifices really in the world, the idea that 800 years of history could be going up in smoke. And when you saw those social media videos, Wolf, of the moment when the spire collapsed, you actually could hear people in the crowd of onlookers gasp. There's a sense that this isn't just about a building made of stone. This is a building that has survived for hundreds of years, that has come to signify so much of France's culture and history of resilience. It's been through incredibly painful and difficult times. It's been ransacked by the Huguenots in the 1500s. It was desecrated during the French Revolution. And yet it has withstood that. It's been lived through the Crusades, through the Napoleonic Wars, through 2 world wars. Notre Dame has remained a kind of cultural institution, not just for the French, as you said, but for people around the world. What young American does not remember, if they're fortunate enough to have traveled to Paris, the first time you stand there and you behold the extraordinary facade in front of you, and you go into the cathedral and you see that beautiful, unique rose window, and there's there's a sense, whether you are Catholic, whether you are Jewish, whether you are an atheist, whether you're a spiritual person at all, of the sort of majesty, of the artistry, of the architecture. You feel humbled in the presence of this building. And I think that's probably why, Wolf, we have seen such strong reactions from people, in spite of the fact that it does not appear that this was a great human catastrophe in terms of loss of life. There is such a sense of grief as people watch this iconic and beautiful building reduced to less than its former glory. Although hopefully now, with the news that the blaze is starting to be contained, that the structure is still intact, perhaps it will be renovated once again to its former glory, Wolf.
We can only hope and pray. And we see the folks who have gathered there on the streets